1977 was a funny old year in music, particularly firstly because of the rise of punk and the huge album Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols, but secondly because of something I'll show you in a second. But just an experiment to start this video off. Here are some of the albums that either went number one in 1977 or are some of my personal favourites. So this is the biggest selling album of the year, ABBA's Arrival. Then you've got AC/DC's Let There Be Rock. And again, you can decide for yourselves whether these are really members of my personal collection are ones that are just there by being in job lots. The Shadows, 20 Golden Greats went to number one. The Mathis collection went to number one. The Sound of Bread went to number one. Barbara Streisand and Christopherson's A Star Is Born soundtrack went to number one. And then a few of my favourite albums of the year. Styx, The Grand Illusion, Pink Floyd, Animals. Trying to keep the album stack up here. And then finally there was this, as I put the records away. There was this. Songs by Jim Steinman, Meat Loaf, Bat Out of Hell. This was out there. It really was. And you'd be forgiven for only knowing the title track of this album. You really would. One of the biggest tracks of Meat Loaf's career. But I am Toby from TIJ Music, and welcome today to a review of the debut album by American rock singer Meat Loaf, and that of course is Bat Out of Hell, released in October 1977 on the Epic or Cleveland record label. All written by composer Jim Steinman. I think I'm going to go for Steinman rather than Steinman. I think Steinman is the right pronunciation. If it's not, shoot me. But I wanted to show that at the start with all those albums because it just proves how out there this was. And particularly the early 70s, music was all over the place, but still by the late 70s there were different genres that went to number one and different things that were popular. And this was so different that yes, didn't quite get to number one in the UK, but even still it is one of the best selling albums of all time. Now this was developed from a musical that was never really finished called Neverland, that was written by Jim Steinman. It was almost like a rock version of Peter Pan, and it was recorded over 2 years, this album, produced by Todd Rundgren. Now this idea came to Steinman in around about 1974. Again, it was part of this musical Neverland, and they couldn't get a record company to produce it. It was seen as too gimmicky, it was seen as stupid, and basically something that wouldn't be worthwhile because it wouldn't sell. But they went to producer Todd Rundgren and let him on a little bit that they had signed for RCA Records, but they hadn't. So Rundgren accepted the producer's position, and when he realised they hadn't really signed for the record label, he essentially paid for the production of the album himself. And recording started late in 1975 with some of the members of the E Street Band, actually, Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, in addition to Rundgren's group, Utopia, members of that group. And another member of this E Street Band, Steve Van Zandt, contacted Cleveland Records, and after they listened to the spoken word intro to the second track, Hot Summer Night, the founder, Steve Popovich, was convinced, and the album was released on Cleveland Record in October 1977. But the parent label, Epic, hated it. They absolutely hated it. But Popovich was relentless in his efforts to get everybody on the Epic label, and of course all of CBS Records as a whole, and the radio on board. And what really brought it so big in this country, the UK, is the BBC television programme, The Old Whistle Test, the Old Grey Whistle Test, that aired a clip of the live band performing the title track, and the response was so good that they were invited to perform Paradise by the Dashboard Light a week later. But it was kind of an uncool, unfashionable, non-radio record. In fact, all of these tracks are pretty long. You're looking at 5 minutes for the track with the least duration, and it's just not a cool radio record. And a little bit like the Sex Pistols, I guess, that got banned, of course. It was one of those records that almost had the Streisand effect. People couldn't see it, so they went out and bought the album. And it was really just a must-have for anybody. Wasn't an immediate hit in the States, though. It sold about 200,000 records a year. It sells about 200,000 records a year now, sorry. And has sold an estimated 50 million worldwide, and retrospectively has sold 40 million in the States, and 1.7 million albums in Australia, where it's the best-selling album of the country, period. And it's also stayed on the UK album charts for 500 weeks, which puts it only third in that little run, behind Fleetwood Mac's Rumours and Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and went 14 times platinum in the US and 11 times platinum in the UK. It's one of those ideas that shouldn't have worked, but it really did. And I think before anybody listens to this album, they need to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt, knowing that it was developed on that musical, and it's meant to be cinematic, it's meant to be theatrical, it's meant to be full of bombast. But I'll tell you something, it really works. So in these reviews, I go through each of the tracks, albeit there's only 7, so it'll be fairly short today. We'll go through all 7 tracks, talk a little bit about each track, give them a rating out of 10, and then we come to a verdict at the end of the review. So to kick this album off, we have got the title track, Bat Out of Hell. This has to be a 10 out of 10, doesn't it? I can't really say too much more than has already been said. This is just a rock epic, an absolute rock epic. And as a Pink Floyd fan, as you can see from my t-shirt, Pink Floyd's Animals today, I'm quite a fan of long tracks, extended tracks, and this track and the album is full of them. And believe it or not, it was only released as a single 17 months after the album. Absolutely incredible. And it was just shy of 5 minutes, the single was. And one of the really interesting things about this track is that Steinman insisted that the song should have the sound of a motorcycle, as you can see on the cover as well. A brilliant cover, by the way. A real good cover with, as you can see, the almost... I don't even know what that is. I guess it's supposed to be a bat, you would have thought. But it's a cover that's never really made sense to me, because when I first looked at the cover, I thought those two were the eyes there, the almost headlights, and it's almost a bit of a distorted point of view, but of course you can see as you flip the record round, you've got Meat on the back of the bicycle, but yeah, it's a really good cover, but it's got that motorcycle on it, and Steinman complained to Todd Rundgren about this at the final overdub session. So rather than use a recording of that real motorcycle, he played the section on his guitar, did Rundgren, leading straight into the solo without a break. And Meat Loaf said that he was so impressed with that improvisation, and he actually played the lead solo in 15 minutes. It was all done within a space of 45 minutes, and apparently, according to Meat Loaf, the most astounding thing he's ever seen in his life. Again, 10 out of 10 this track. Absolutely awesome. But as I said earlier, you'd be a bit of a fool for... not necessarily a fool, but you wouldn't be stupid for thinking that this is a one-track wonder, this album, and it really isn't. We go on to the second track now. You took the words right out of my mouth, in brackets, Hot Summer Night, and oh my god. I'll tell you what, Jim liked his long tracks, and he liked his long track titles as well. What a mouthful. But this one's going to be an 8 out of 10 for me. It was the first single from the album, released in coinciding with the album in October 1977. With For Crying Out Loud on the B-side, and it begins with a spoken word section with Jim Steinman and the American actress Marcia McLean, and again, it was this section that convinced the founder at Cleveland Records to sign the deal to bring this album out. And while it's great, it's catchy, you have to compare it to the other tracks on the album, and I think it's actually the weakest on the album. It's the only one here that's, I'd say, most aligned to being a single, I suppose, and suffers slightly from that, from a musical's perspective, but nevertheless, it's still a great track, so this one an 8 out of 10. Third track on the album is Heaven Can Wait, which I think is a 9 out of 10, and this project can almost be seen as a gimmick. But if it was seen as a gimmick, even after the fantastic title track, this just really debunks that theory. A beautiful song that really shows Meat Loaf's serious vocal talents. It's desperate in its tone, but subtle at the same time. It's certainly got that musical, theatrical feel to it, but the lyrics are excellent. It's just an excellent ballad, it really is. Track number 4, All Revved Up with No Place to Go. Oh, back to the gimmick again. It's real strange how this record goes from high to low to high to low to ballad to just general pop track, but I tell you what, it works, it really does. So we're back to the gimmick again with the saxophone, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I love a saxophone, and surely, if you're watching this when it's coming out, in the few months it's coming out, surely this is the song of 2020 and 2021, all revved up with no place to go with COVID-19. But like all these tracks, it's got that adolescent feel, which I suppose gives it a little bit of gimmickiness. But nevertheless, it's a great groovy track that puts the stereo up to 10, and again, excellent sax from Edgar Winter, who plays saxophone on this track. And the end section with the all revved up and no place to go. I'd say I'll limit myself to one of those in each review. I can't do it twice. And that end section just rocks like hell. It really does. It's fantastic again. A 9 out of 10. Track number 5, the start of side 2 on the old-fashioned vinyl. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And as I said before, this record changes pace all the time. And even within songs, as you'll see in the next track with Paradise by the Dashboard Light. Another ballad here, another single as well, which reached number 11 on the Billboard Hit 100 and earned a gold single and eventually went platinum, so one of the best known Meat Loaf songs of all time. It was actually inspired by a cast member of Jim's then current musical Rheingold, suggesting he wrote something simple like Elvis Presley's I want you, I need you, I love you. And you can kind of tell from the lyric, I want you, that I need you, but there ain't no way I'm ever going to love you. Don't be sad, because so tempting. It's one of those sing-along albums, because 2 out of the 3 ain't bad. It's definitely one I can envisage the great Elvis singing. Enough, just a beautiful ballad, and I think you've got to give big credit, especially here, to Steinman for the simple but exquisite writing, and also, of course, to Meat and the band for the excellent execution. So already we're at the penultimate track, which is Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and this is the only adjective I could come up with here is strange, but it's brilliant. It's an 8-minute track, this, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, with 3 distinct parts. Paradise, Let Me Sleep on It, and Praying for the End of Time, which goes from your kind of typical male-female style duet, which we'd see a bit later on with Dead Ringer for Love on a later album, which is the Dead Ringer album, so technically the title track, as close to it as you're going to get. Then your heavy section, then 3 minutes of Let Me Sleep on It, and then she going, well, I want to run out, I want to know right now, which, typical teenager, and I can say that now because I turned 20 in February. But one of the longest tracks actually ever to be cut onto a 45 RPM single at just over 5 minutes. The album version's 8 minutes, and the duet is just got all the groove you can imagine. It's a brilliant song. Typically adolescence. It's, you know, almost either a driving song or a making love song, and it all goes wrong at the end, so it's either a crash or maybe not safe for YouTube. But yeah, brilliant track, like the previous, 10 out of 10, and it's really a perfect side too. For crying out loud, this is another 10 out of 10, and it feels like I'm just complimented out now. But this is just another excellent ballad. None of the bombast, none of the dramatic guitars, just the typical orchestra sound. But there is the bombast here of Meat Loaf's excellent voice. Just look at the back of this album cover, right? I'll get it out the protective sleeve. Tell me that man there, him, tell me that voice comes out of that man before listening to it. Well, before listening to it, that's a bit tricky. It's just astounding. Meat Loaf has got an excellent voice. It's one of the favourite songs that Jim Steinman says he's ever written, and from start to end, it's brilliant, just like this album. Yeah, 7 brilliant tracks. Don't think it was ever matched by Meat Loaf again. I've listened to Dead Ringer and a few of the other albums from then on, but I'm getting Midnight at the Lost and Found. It's coming in the post this week, so I'm really looking forward to that. But this album comes out at a really fantastic verdict, which is thoroughly deserving of a 9.4 out of 10. And simply put, this album just works. 7 outstanding tracks, and like any album, as you can see from the ratings I've given the tracks here, it's got its highlights, of course, but it's an incredibly consistent album from a quality perspective, despite being quite inconsistent from a tempo and feel perspective. It's incredibly theatrical, cinematic, but it's what Jim Steinman intended. Absolutely fantastic album. I've listened to this morning, and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure for the next fortnight now, I'm going to have all these tracks in the back of my head, and luckily, when I end this video, you won't have to hear me singing them on camera. I'll leave that to the great Meat Loaf himself. But if you enjoyed that review, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. Comment your thoughts as well. What's your relationship with this album and Meat Loaf's catalogue as a whole? And of course, remember to subscribe for regular album reviews and top 10s. I've been Toby from TIJ Music. Thank you very much for your company today. And I'll see you guys in the next review of mine. Goodbye for now.